Hello, advanced programming. We are going to be talking about network programming today. I'm going to open up a couple of programs that we went over in class, and this is a review for students who missed it or students who want to see this again. So we're making programs, sketches I suppose is the proper word in processing, that will communicate with each other. So we have two programs open here. Font's a little bit on the big side. Let me just set up a font size that will work a little bit nicer for this video. Yeah, so on the left side over here, this program is going to represent a server. And on the right side, we have a client that will connect to our server. They're basically the same, although I've put a little bit of extra effort into the client during class. We were trying to solve a few problems, and I just solved it on one side. So here's a story behind what we're making. Actually, I think I'll have to shrink these down temporarily. Basically going to make a sketch that when you run it, I'm going to run the server first, as you always must. When you run it, it can connect to another sketch. I can run this side over here. This is the client. The client will connect to the server. And then you can say, for example, send messages. So in the chat server, I could say hello, and then this client side will receive hello, and I can respond back. I can say goodbye, and then it will receive it. I have a bit of a chat history going on here, but nothing very interesting. If I type in something else like so long. Oh, I guess I don't. Never mind. I don't have a chat history going on. Sucks to be me, and then it just kind of transfers messages between each other. But they're two separate sketches, so how is this possible? So we'll take a look at how this is working, and I hope you enjoy. So I guess we'll start with the server. And actually, as I go through the server, you might want to just kind of notice, like, oh, there's a lot of similarities. Actually, maybe I'll just kind of do them at the same time so you can see the similarities as well. So on the server side and the client side, you have to import this library, this processing.net library. It isn't one of those libraries that you have to import from the internet. It's one that comes with processing but isn't built into the core language, because most sketches don't need to connect to the internet that you write. So you do have to do the import statement. And then on the server side, I make my server object. This is the server class over here. On the client side, I make a client object. So these terms are basically a server is going to be the sketch that is receiving connections from clients, and then the client is going to be the program that's seeking a server out to connect to. And for this particular program, we're not really using it like a like a server in the sense of there's a single server and many clients. Although we did do that example in class, I can just mention it briefly when we get there. But we're mostly just going to use this as sort of two halves of a program. So we got the server half, we got the client half, and they're really just two halves of almost like a peer-to-peer connection is how we'll start using it. So in the setup, we're going to be instantiating that. There's a couple other things I should mention in a bit, but I'll just finish this up here. Here's our server object. We're instantiating it. We're giving this as the sketch that we're going to be connecting. And this is a port number. Notice that for our instantiation of the server, there's a similar instantiation for the client. It's a little bit fancier though, but check out the port numbers are the same. And then also notice that when you make a client, there's an additional piece of information. That's the IP address of the server you're connecting to. The server doesn't need to specify the IP address. It just will take the IP address of whatever machine you're running it on, and the client needs to specify that so that it can find it. If you're just running your sketch on your own computer, then you can use this IP address, which is the universal IP address for yourself, the home address. So that will work out beautifully. And if you wanted to connect to someone else's server, say somebody else on a different computer runs a server and you'd like to connect to them, then you could put in their IP address and you can ask them to find that and give it to you. There's also some strings we're using. So you'll see that both programs have an incoming and outgoing string. Strings are the data type that we use to package and send messages across the server. They're just a very flexible data type for including many different characters or symbols. And essentially a string is just a string of text or a sequence, an ordered sequence of characters, you name it, letters, numbers, all the symbols you can imagine. It also includes things like the shift key and F3 and all these kind of different buttons on your keyboard that don't normally type stuff technically have an associated character and could end up inside your string. So we'll talk a bit about that later on. But yeah, strings are basically going to be the messages, both the messages we're sending and the messages we're receiving. So if we go down to the draw function, we'll see that they, again, look pretty similar. Here I'm just showing what the incoming and outgoing strings are on either one. And then here's how I'm listening for, incoming connections. So on the server side, what we do is we check to see if there's an available client that wants to give us a message. And we can fetch that client with the available method, which it returns the first available client. You might have many clients that are available, so this just returns one per frame, or 1 per 60th of a second approximately. So if you have a whole bunch of people sending you messages, you won't get them all at once, but that's totally fine and works out just fine. What happens if nobody's sending you a message? Well, then this returns null. And that's why we have this if statement that goes after it. So if my server.available did not find a client that was trying to send us a message, which will happen most of the time, then this is going to be null. And so we only work with it if it's not null, which is what this line says. And if it's not null, then we read the incoming message. It's myClient.read string that tells us the incoming message. And because we're displaying it every frame, it'll show up on our screen. And then over on the, so I'll just highlight this to compare. On the client side, it's a little bit different. Receiving messages looks like this. myClient.available tells us how many messages are available from the server that are coming at us in this frame of time that the draw function has run. So it could be, 10, 1,000 messages, many, but honestly, that won't really happen for this chat program. You just can't type fast enough, although I'm sure someone will challenge me on that and spam some key presses and maybe try to get it higher than 1. But the story is if it's greater than 0, we got a message, so then we can read it. And we just read it, and it'll replace whatever was in incoming with the new message, and then it's read and done, and is kind of tossed away, unless you save it. So this is how you read messages. Basically, the read string is the way to do it, and you have these if statements just to protect it from doing things when there are no messages that are available, since we're doing this every frame. Last but not least, we have our key pressed functions, and this one over here is a little bit fancier. I'll talk about that in a second. But let's focus on the simpler version in the server. And basically, you can mirror image these. These can be almost exactly the same. Basically, here's me. If I press Enter, so this is the key press function. Actually, I should just mention this is the function that will run every time you press a key. So we can check what the key was with the key variable. It's a built-in variable in processing that just takes the value of whatever the last key that was pressed. So hey, if it was enter, we'll go ahead and write the message. This is how you send a message in processing. So the myServer object can send a message by saying write, and we write this outgoing string. And then we reset it to nothing. And then where does this outgoing string get composed? Well, if you press any other key. If it's not enter, then we just do this string concatenation here. Basically, we're going to add whatever key was pressed onto the end of our outgoing string. So this is how we build the string. You type a character that's not enter, and gets put onto the end of the string. So if you type A and then B, and then C, the string will go from A to AB to ABC, and so on. Eventually, you'll press enter. It'll write that message across the network, and you'll reset it back to the empty string. That's basically it. Over here on the client side, I've added a little bit of extra goodness. Still got the same kind of stuff, although notice that in the client, we do a dot write. And the reason, a my client dot write. So over in the server, it was my server dot write. So there's a main difference. It turns out that backspace is a key that gets added to the string. So if you type backspace, it doesn't delete anything. It adds a backspace character to our string, which looks like a little box when we actually are running the program, which is kind of boring. So I added in, if it's a backspace key, I did some string math, which we'll learn more about as we go forward. But basically, we're using substring to chop off the last character in the string. So substring allows you to get a smaller version of a string. So outgoing.substring, what we do is we just get the whole string, the whole outgoing string from the beginning to the end minus 1. So then it does not get the last character. So backspace effectively with this code here will remove a character. It's kind of a bit of a strange twist perhaps when you're doing this to think of backspace as something that has to be programmed. So that might be an interesting experience. And then this was some, I don't know, this is just a long roundabout thing. Not really important. We were just trying to make sure we don't type, like when you press the shift key, it adds a character, and you press various keys, it adds characters that we didn't really want. So we were just checking to see if it was a valid string, and we had some fun with like making a list of things. I think I forgot the N. So if you download this program, here I'll type it in now. If you download this program from my website, then you will not be able to type N's. That's how you fix it right there. I'll save it just to make sure. So there you go. That's basically the simplest client server, or close to the simplest client server type of program that you can make. So this will sort of form the foundation for all the different projects we're going to make throughout this unit. So I hope you had a good time watching this. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask about any part of this project. Remember, all this code is on my website, so you can go copy and paste it and get started with that. All right, thank you, everyone, for listening.